Bill, I thought they were going to get blown out at one point in the third quarter. They made a fight of it in the fourth, but it's the first time I think all season long where I watched a Celtics game and I thought they may not be the most athletic team on the court. Like at times tonight, Oklahoma City looked more athletic, and it's a very rare thing to see. But I do like, and look, there's no moral victories, but I do like the way that they fought back in the fourth quarter. And I thought one thing, finally they put Tatum on Shea, because I don't remember a time where Jrue Holiday and Derek White both got blown by on defense in the first quarter of the game. That's what happened with Shea. I think it just took him a little too long to get to that adjustment.
I was on a text thread with a couple Celtic fans talking about, this was before the game, would Joe put Tatum on SGA, A, and then B, when would he do it, right? Because I think SGA and Brunson are similar. I don't know if you saw Knicks Minnesota the other night, but they threw McDaniels on Brunson, and Brunson had a lot of issues with it. Like you have these smaller guards, and SGA is like 6'5", 6'6", but I want length on him. I think White probably has a better chance, but I think they were probably worried about the foul trouble with him. But they waited, they put Jalen on him. And honestly, he kind of torched Jalen. And he did pretty much whatever he wanted with any guard. And then I thought Tatum had some real success against him in the fourth quarter. And Brian, this was the big question I had with this team. If they actually want to win the title, it can't, and where Tatum is at his point in his career, there's going to be games where they don't need him to be the number one scorer in the team. What they need is defense and rebounding. He finished the game with 13 rebounds. I thought he played some really good defense on SJ down the stretch, and Porzingis carried more of the offense load. The guy that really just killed them in the game was Jalen. This was a bad 2023 playoffs Jalen performance. He couldn't shoot. He had his typical 3 unforced error turnovers and wasn't good on defense either. And I think if he played better, I think they would have won.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of, I don't want to say the most aggravating part, because if you go back to like the beginning of the season, we had questions about Jalen. And then in the month of December, he sort of turned it around. He cut back his 3-point shooting. Now in this game today, he took 8 3-pointers, and it felt like he had no confidence in that shot whatsoever. But the bigger point with that is, you're right. I mean, you lose this game by 4 points, and a guy that has been so good for you over the past month and change, he was just atrocious in this game. And
it's his first bad one in a while.
Yeah, and I do think that if this game happened 6 weeks ago, I would have been concerned about it. But today, I just sort of chalk it up to he had a bad afternoon, or the bad evening, I should say. And I guess that's the good thing, is Jalen played this poorly, and you were still in the game. And to your point on Tatum, I think it's a great one, because Porzingis carried them in the first half. In the first quarter, he had 12 points. And I do feel like, in some sense, I don't know what happened in the third quarter, where they lost that quarter 40-25, and it felt like what got them the lead was playing through Porzingis. We saw this so many times on the road trip, going back to a couple of games in that series, where the Lakers game, third quarter, they played through Porzingis. You go to the Kings game, they play through Porzingis in the third quarter. The third quarter had been an issue for this team for a large portion of the season. They fixed this. I'm just trying to figure out what happened tonight in the third quarter. For you. Okay.
So I think part of their game plan, first of all, their defense lost them this game. And we could talk about the third quarter, but then we talk fourth quarter too. One of their game plans here was, hey, Josh Giddey, we're not afraid of you. Yeah. Feel free. Go nuts.
Just let him shoot.
Josh Giddey was good in this game. First of all, he went 4 for 7 from 3, which he's an awful 3-point shooter. So, and all of those, they were like, please take those. And they actually made them. And they were putting Porzingis on them. They were cheating Porzingis and trying to see if they could get away with him, where they weren't afraid of Giddey shooting. Put Porzingis on him, and then Porzingis can come and help on some of the other players. Well, not only was Giddey making threes, but a couple times he went by Porzingis and created shots. I just thought he played really well. He only played 27 minutes. He had 23 points. He was plus 10. He had his usual rebound assist combo. So that was that. And then in the fourth quarter, it was really 3 defensive possessions. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but Chet hit 2 big threes in the last couple minutes. Both of them were Porzingis doing the Rob Williams memorial. I'm out with my hand up, but I'm a step and a half back from where I actually should be, and Chet was able to line up and make it. And then the one that shocked me, so OKC, they need a basket in the last minute. Jalen Williams has the ball, and it's SGA, Tatum's on SGA, and White's on Jalen Williams. And they get a switch to get SGA on White. And then Jalen Williams takes Tatum off the dribble and he scored on him. And that was the game, because if they get a stop there, I actually think the Celtics could have won. So to me, those 3 possessions were the killers in the fourth quarter. And then just Giddey just playing really well, I thought really hurt him.
Yeah, when there's one other play I would say is I felt like, all right, Pritchard deserved time to stay in the game because of the way that he played. But at the end of the game, when it's a defensive possession, I would rather see Jrue Holiday on the court because Jalen Williams. Oh,
you would have?
You think?
Really?
Because you see what happened? He ends up on the ground. Jalen Williams just goes right through him and he gets an easy opportunity at the bucket. And then the other thing, to your point about Porzingis, the dagger Chet 3, I guess technically it wasn't the dagger because the Celtics had a chance on the other end. Porzingis is just on that play, and it's tough to criticize Porzingis after the evening he just had, but there was no reason to help there. Like Tatum, Shea had not beaten Tatum yet.
Right.
Tatum had him at the top of the key, and he's trying to drive on Tatum. It wasn't like he had created an advantage where Porzingis has to cheat off Chet, and instead he sort of cheated off him on that play. And then I would say the other thing that sort of aggravated me in this game, and this happened in the Warriors game too, Shea picked up his 4th foul with 8:52 left in the third quarter, and they were hiding him, right? So what I don't understand is, and it's not like the Celtics played well offensively. As we mentioned, they only had 25 points in that third quarter. Even a guy like Sam Hauser, who was getting guarded by Shea, they're purposely doing that because they don't think you'll put Hauser in any action. And guess what the Celtics do? They don't put Hauser in any action. Instead, he's just hanging out by the 3-point line. And I thought that was an opportunity to try to take advantage of the game, is try to get that 5th foul on Shea. And I give them a lot of credit, OKC, Dagnall, because this is something Brad Stevens used to do. He wouldn't take his guys out when they got in foul trouble, because Brad's rationale was, okay, well, what am I just going to lose 5 minutes, pick to take him out of the game with 5 minutes? And the other bet that Brad used to make, which I think is the same bet that Dagnall bet on Mazzulla, is they won't go after him. I can hide my best guy, and they're not going to actually go after him. So
what was it? It was 8 minutes left in the third quarter when he got the 4th foul?
8:52, almost 9 minutes left in the
because when that happened, I was like, oh my God, they're going to win. But you're right. They didn't attack him. There's all kinds of things they could have done, and maybe they'll learn from this. But even like they could have played 3 guards at the same time. You got to make him guard somebody and at least be in the mix. And it didn't feel like he was in the mix defensively at all. I agree that was a huge mistake.
Yeah, it just doesn't really make sense to me that when, especially, it'd be one thing if it's just some random player, but it's when a guy's on his way to having a 30-plus point performance, it would seem like that's sort of the time that you want to go after him.
Do you want to talk about the big picture angle of this game? And I was on Termini and Eddie Johnson's show today, and I was saying how we do this Ringer 100 that we hand in our list like every month, and I put SGA over Tatum. I put him 5 because I've watched too many of these games where he goes mano a mano with the other team's best player, and his team wins or he does better. And I was just like, I just think he's been more consistent in games like this. You watched the game today, it was really close because Tatum did a lot of good stuff. He had his usual, how many times does he just do the 28-foot pull-up 3 where you're like, what are you doing? He did in both halves, right?
On Chet.
Just go by him, bounce into him, get a foul. So he's still doing that, but I loved how hard he played. I love how hard the Celtics played. But SGA was a tiny bit better, and I feel like that's why they won. I will say this, though, Brian. I think there were 2 awesome Celtic games this year that really felt like finals games. And it was this one and it was the Minnesota game. And they played other really good games. Like one of the Miami games was good early in the season. They've had good games. The Golden State game was super entertaining. This game and the Minnesota game felt finals level with, even if you look at the Celtics stats, they took 43s, they took 29 free throws. That's kind of where we want them to be, right? I don't want them to take 55 threes. I thought they went to the rim hard. I thought when they needed baskets, they had really nice balance. The threes they took, I thought were good. White was fantastic again. And weirdly, it was good. This is the 7th loss of the season. 6 of them they could have won. And they could have won this one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And they actually, because what happened in the Warriors game is they didn't take advantage of what the Warriors don't do well. The Warriors are terrible in terms of defending without fouling. They foul like crazy.
Yeah.
The Thunder, that's one of their weaknesses, is they foul a ton. They commit, I believe it's the 5th most fouls in the NBA, or they give up the 5th most free throws. And the Celtics actually did get to the free throw line in this game. And you look at Tatum in this one, he takes 10 free throws. Porzingis takes 9. And even in this bad Jalen game, he still gets 8 free throw attempts, which you like to see that from your star players because this is something that they've struggled with in the past.
And 33 assists.
Yeah. So, I mean, the offense was not the problem in this game. The defense became the issue in the game, and it felt like it took them too long, as we mentioned earlier, to get to that Jason Tatum matchup. The one other critique I would have in this game is they're down 18. Now, they make a comeback in the fourth quarter, but they're down double-digit points to start the fourth. And they come out with a lineup of Al Horford and Luke Cornett. If you're trying to make a comeback in this game, you need to do it offensively. And I don't think Cornett played poorly in this game. I just don't understand the combination at that point of the game to go with the double big lineup there. That, to me, was just a perplexing decision to go with those two guys on the court. If anything, I would say try to go small, because if you look at that Thunder team, they don't play two bigs ever. And it wasn't like you were getting an advantage out of the two bigs. If anything, I thought playing the two bigs actually hurt, and maybe the numbers will say differently when the data finalizes tomorrow in terms of the tracking data, but it wasn't like OKC was struggling offensively when you put two bigs on the court. If anything, it made them easier because you could get one of those guys in the action. How many times do we see the ball just flying around because Cornett got caught up in some sort
Brissett
of
should have played.
switch? That's a great point. Where was Brissett? Because he had been, I thought he played well for this team over the past couple of weeks. He's 100%. A DNP.
What was the game you and I and Chad Finn were texting? He played, that Clipper game. I went to that game where he played 18 minutes. They blew him out, but he was 4 for 5 from 3. And it felt like Joe was kind of getting into a rhythm with, okay, these are the guys. And Kata had a really good game that game. Then Kata sucked against the Lakers. But I felt like Brissett, I think his minutes have been yanked around. I think it's a mistake. Like, especially, you're right, a game like this, why are you playing two bigs against a team? They're dying for the other team to do something like that because they're small but they want, give us big and slow. We're going to be able to move the ball around and attack them. I think Dagnall is such a good coach. I mean, he's clearly, unquestionably, a heavy coach of the year favorite right now. But you look at they're playing. Wallace played 17 minutes as a rookie, and by the way, did not look great when he was out there. But even he uses Isaiah Joe, and sometimes he'll play a lot of minutes. This game he only played 13 minutes, but he has such a feel over who are my guys in this? And I've seen him pull the plug on Giddey, where Giddey will just Giddey doesn't have it and he's out. But he saw something with Giddey in that matchup today. And I thought their best five played against our best five really, really well. Hey, think about this. If I told you Porzingis was going to score 34 and that we were going to have 29 free throws and 33 assists, would you have said we were going to win?
Handily, by 15, 20 points.
Yeah, it's we blew out OKC, but they scored 127, and Shea didn't even really do that much in the fourth quarter. I bet he had 4 points, 6 points, something like that.
Yeah.
That was it wasn't his usual lay the smackdown end of the game stuff. It was Chet, and it was that Jalen Williams possession.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there. First of all, just circling back to Brissett. And I know the Celtics were able to get some offensive rebounds, but that's something that he does well. OKC on the season gives up the 29th in offensive rebounds against at 13. I thought that, especially because it felt like when they didn't get the offensive rebound, we know that they're the best transition team in the NBA, so they were getting burned on the other end. If you have a more athletic guy like Brissett, I think that sort of helps you instead of Cornett. And then the big picture stuff you were mentioning, the thing that scares me about this Thunder team, I do think, say, knock on wood that this happens, they both get to the finals. That's a difficult matchup for the Celtics. And OKC now, we think about these windows for the Celtics, it kind of scares you looking into the future because they're going to have Chet forever, they're going to have Shea forever, and they can make a move if they really wanted to this upcoming trade deadline. I don't know
look at the three, Kenrich Williams played 13, Wiggins played 13, Micic played 11, Isaiah Joe played 13, but you take two of those guys and just give 26 minutes to a kick-ass dude who becomes a 7-8 man rotation guy. To me, they're one of the 5 teams that can win the title, and Shea is one of the best 5 players in the league. And for them to not pursue this seriously, I would be, if I were them, so encouraged by what I saw from Chet, not only in this game, but against Denver, against Minnesota, a team that you think Minnesota should be able to overpower them. They just have Chet that in. Chet holds his own. He's tough as hell. He protects the rim. He's really crafty with SGA and that high screen stuff. I think that's their hardest play to defend. if they put a little switch or Chet pops off, your big guy better be ready to fly out there, anti-Rob Williams style. I think they're really hard to play, but on the flip side, like it's weird. The Celtics lost, but this game made me feel better about them. The fact that they were smart enough in the fourth quarter to put Tatum on Shea, I was kind of proud of second row Joe. I was like, okay, you did it. I didn't know if you were going to have the balls to do that. You did it. And from Tatum's standpoint, all right, don't get in the hero ball contest with Shea. Like, fucking guard him. Take him out on that end and trust your teammates. And I thought that was really encouraging.
Yeah, and the fact that Tatum wanted the matchup, too, because you could tell that he wanted it. And we've seen him do it before, going back to a couple of years ago against Kevin Durant in that series against Brooklyn, where Durant was, like, horrible against Tatum, and Tatum deserves a lot of credit for that. So maybe that is something, because I do think we talked earlier in the season how this is sort of an adjustment period for Jalen, but Tatum in this game had to have realized that, hey, this is going to be more of a Porzingis game. And I know he still finished with his 30 points and all that, but Porzingis at times and in a lot of games is going to be the biggest advantage the Celtics have. So that means that Tatum's going to impact the game in other ways. We've talked in the past about how he's a great rebounder, but on the defensive end of the floor, taking on that matchup was huge. And I do think, going back to your point about how this is sort of encouraging, I think the big thing we've seen in a lot of these wins is, and I know they lost tonight, but there have been so many games this year where I felt like if they didn't have Porzingis, they would have lost the game. So I do think it's sort of a blessing and a curse. The blessing is the fact that, okay, they do finally have this advantage. You've brought up on your pod before, like they were sick and tired of getting into these postseason series where their offense just gets stuck in the mud. It gets stale. And if the threes aren't falling, or if Tatum or Jalen's turning the ball over late. So I think you now have that answer, as long as Porzingis is healthy, because the first quarter of this game and really into the second quarter, the Celtics probably get blown out of the building if they don't have Porzingis in this game to just go
with
to.
The way Shea was playing, I agree.
Yeah, and I think the one thing he can do too, especially in this game where that team likes to play fast, and they're gonna play Indiana again coming up soon. Another team that likes to play fast. Milwaukee, to a lesser extent, likes to play fast. And I know it seems like not the most effective strategy because you're the Celtics and you're super athletic, but sometimes it's useful to just slow the game down and give Porzingis the ball, because like when he gets the ball at the nail there at the free throw line, there's nothing you can really do. And because if you bring help, he's a good enough passer to kick it out. The one thing that I've been really impressed with is he just shoots over guys. Like it's as if the defender, anybody that's shorter than him, it's as if the defender's not even there. Like I haven't seen anybody.
Did you see him against Wemby?
Yeah.
What was it, like an inch apart? Maybe like an inch and a quarter?
He looks small.
How much taller do you think Wemby was than him?
Is he 2 inches taller?
I would have said like an inch and a half. I was shocked because everyone says Porzingis is 7'3", and what you're saying, like on that foul line shot, you could feel it in the Detroit game. It seems like his shot's going to get blocked when you're watching on TV because you have this down angle on it, right? But every time he gets a shot off, nobody touches it, nobody blocks it. And the post-up stats, I mean, one of the things I'm going to be interested to see how they experiment with it as the season goes along. Porzingis, I think, is second for post-up per 100%, like his points per possession on post-ups. He was at I think it was 1.48 points per 100.
Yeah.
But then Tatum was 7th, and I think Jalen was 11th. And there's always somebody that's too small for one of those three guys, whoever they're playing. And I think as the season's going along, they're starting to figure out, like, oh, you're going to guard Porzingis with him? Okay. And they're kind of surgically taking this stuff apart. So as I watch them, I just feel like this team is starting to get more sophisticated over who they are. Also, like, Porzingis hasn't shot the three that well. And this is something that this is what part of the advertisement with Porzingis, right? He's supposed to be this 40% 3-point shooter. We haven't seen that piece totally yet. When that gets unlocked, I don't know if the Derek White 3-point shooting is sustainable. I know everybody's been talking about him for 5 weeks, but he made 3 of the craziest threes of the season for him. Kind of coming off semi-fast break, one-footed, off-balance threes, like he was, Paul Pierce in the mid-2000s. I'm not sure how sustainable that is, but I do think Porzingis can get better.
To highlight the point you made, so Porzingis is at 1.48 points per possession on post-ups, and Tatum is at 1.23. And the best offense in the NBA is 1.22. So those are both...
And both of those are top 7, right? Porzingis is second? Yeah.
Yeah, Porzingis is one of the most. He's been for a while. He was the most efficient post scorer in the NBA. He's dipped a little bit below that, but I mean, he's still as efficient as all hell. But the other thing you mentioned about Porzingis and the 3-point shooting, even if it's not there, the fact that he's willing to take it from that deep, guys are still defending it, right? Like This is the difference, and there's a lot of differences between the two players. But even when Al was having that outstanding shooting season last year, where he's top 5 in the NBA in 3-point percentage, he was never defended like this. With Porzingis, the defense is still freaked out about it. Now, Derek White, I still think that he can finish the season north of 40% from 3. I think he's good enough to do that because a lot of these are standstill threes that he's getting. The one thing that he actually has been doing...
How about 50%? Because that's where he's been for like 5 weeks. I don't know if 50% is realistic.
Yeah, well, all these guys, your top 8 rotation guys, with the exception of Jalen, who actually did shoot 38% from 3 in December. Outside of Jalen, Tatum, and Porzingis, the rest of those guys, Hauser, Pritchard, Al, White, and Holiday, they all shot north of 40% from 3 in the month of December. And the other thing the Celtics did a lot better this past month in December compared to where they were at earlier this season is we actually finally saw them do other things besides take threes. Like, if you just take their last 6 games prior to tonight, 5th in points per game in the paint, their first 26, they were 26th. The free throws, they took a bunch tonight, as you mentioned. They were 11th in their last 6 games. Their first 26, they were 24th. And they did mention, Joe Mazzulla mentioned it, but also guys on the team mentioned they found different things offensively. Like they were actually playing faster. They were getting more fast break points as well. So I do think is that sort of starting to come together, because I felt like the offense was sort of behind the defense earlier in the season, and I do feel like they've sort of found, and a lot of it goes with Jalen outside of tonight, sort of finding
and
his
Derek
groove.
playing better too.
Yeah, and Derek White playing better, and I thought Jrue finally shooting the ball better as well.
Until tonight. The Porzingis, one thing I've been surprised, I obviously followed his career and watched him and saw him a bunch, but I was not watching him on Washington. I felt like at Dallas, he was kind of an afterthought on the side. He's a really good transition player. Like in the air stuff, alley-oops, hustling down. Like he hustles, I think, way more for points than I was expecting. Like he's a really hungry player, and
he has great hands. Like he catches those. Like when he's rim running, he'll catch these passes like on the break where I'm like, you probably shouldn't be throwing a 7'3" guy that pass, and somehow he makes the catch. And the other thing I think he does too.
Don't you think he's like a phenomenal athlete? Like I'm actually kind of stunned by how athletic he is.
I am too, and the way that he finishes with traffic around him is incredible too. Like, and to your point, I remember when the Celtics were in. I know the Celtics have been interested in him for a couple of years. Yeah. But when they made the trade, I'm like, look, and I'm not going to pretend that I watched a lot of Washington Wizards basketball last year, but I just remember looking at the numbers, like the post-up numbers and the 2-point shooting, all that. I'm like, holy shit, like this is kind of ridiculous.
This is what House was telling me. Why that was his scouting report. He's like, here's the thing. You can't cheat with this dude. You can't put a smaller guy on him or try to hide somebody on him because he will take that dude down and score on him. And he was adamant like that was this part of Porzingis' game that he didn't realize he had. And I've been stunned by that. I've been stunned by the in the air stuff because I don't know, in my head, I just felt like he was this 3-point shooting, kind of stationary, clumsy-ish 7'3" guy. And he's not that at all. He's almost plays like I don't know, like he's 6'11" or something. He's really impressive. And of course, none of this will matter if he gets hurt before May.
Well, and I do think that's an interesting component to this, is because what we've seen lately is he's not playing back-to-backs. He has not been playing back-to-backs lately.
I know for a fact they want to get him 100%. They're not messing around. They know who they are. They know they're going to be in the top. They'll be in the top 3, right? They'll be 1, 2, or 3, probably 1. Embiid's been healthy the whole year. Dame's been healthy the whole year, and Dame does not have a great injury history. I think they feel like with what they have, they're probably going to be the 1 seed anyway, and they're just not putting miles on him. They're not going to do it.
Well, I think it's smart. The one thing I don't agree with the way they're handling this is we know that Horford isn't playing back-to-backs either, and I agree with that, but here's the problem. I don't know why they keep doing this thing where they play them both on the first end, and then they play neither one of the guys on the second end. I don't know if that's like an opportunity to get Keita and Brissett and Cornette minutes, but I would just separate that. I don't know why you need Porzingis and Al both sitting out when you know going into a back-to-back that neither one is going to play both of them. My only rationale behind it is I'm guessing maybe that's when they want to find out what they have with some of these bench guys. But it's weird now because Keita's sort of, it feels like now he's out of the rotation when he was in the rotation for a while. They've gone sort of back to Cornet. And I do think like that's the one thing that I would like
this
to
was
figure
not
out.
a Keita game. There's no way we were seeing him tonight.
Well, he can't. He's not going to play defense against these guys, right? Like he can't play defense. Like he can only play a drop, and he's not really good in a drop coverage right now. But I do wonder.
The Lakers game was tough for him. That was one of those like, oh, okay, we got some work left here.
But I do wonder, like, is there one more guy they need to give minutes to? Like, is Brissett somebody that needs to play more often than he does? Or are they going to have to address that at the trading deadline? I would just let Brissett go. Like, I think he brings too much to the table not to play him.
I think you're right on both. I'm going to go yes and yes. The thing with Keita, there's certain matchups where he becomes important. Like when it's somebody like a Zubats, where and he was great in that Clipper game because Zubats is a certain type of player. He rolls to the basket. His arms are always around the rim. And that's perfect for Keita. The team tonight is not a good, like him against Chet Holmgren. Now I'm a little nervous, but I think like, he was a high second round pick for the Kings 2 years ago, Keita. And the Kings are the Kings. So, and maybe just the kind of style they play, they just kind of gave up on him. But to me, he's on a two-way, but I assume they're going to probably lock that down by the end of the year. They don't need to anytime soon. But he's at least a body for the playoffs. I still feel like if it's not Brissett, then they need to go find who that is. But the biggest thing for me is a defensive guard with size. I just feel like there's games, and you could feel it a little bit, even though Pritchard played pretty well today. There's games where he just seems too small. When he's out there and every guard and forward on the other team is 6'5", 6'6" and up. And there's just times athletically where I feel like it gets a little dicey, don't you think?
Yeah, and especially in this game tonight. I mean, when he's on Jalen Williams, like he's given up too much size and he's given up too much weight. And this is somebody, that I like Pritchard. I think he's a good player. I think he's a very useful player during the regular season. But like going back to the Heat series last year, remember game 1? I can't remember if it was you or Pina came on after that game, and it's like he's on the court when Jimmy Butler's on the court, and they just like immediately Jimmy Butler like almost couldn't believe it in the fourth quarter. He's like, I'm gonna go and get him. So I just wonder what they have resource wise, right? Because you're not trading like one of the top 6 guys, so from a financial standpoint, they don't really have a lot to trade. I mean, is it Austin Rivers? Like, is he trying to make his way back in the league, or he's just living the pod life?
There's going to be a bunch of buyout guys because we have 4 horrible teams. The bottom 4 in this league are really, really bottomy, and maybe somebody like that. I don't know. I don't think they're that worried about it because once you don't have to worry about it until February. The thing, if I had to worry about one thing, and I'm not 100% worried about this yet, but as you know, because we've texted about it a few times, it's like, where are we in Jrue's career right now? What checkpoint are we in the Jrue Holiday experience? Because he looked, I would say, a half step slow from where he was at his all-time peak probably 2 years ago, 2021 Jrue. But we also knew he got hurt at the start of the season. So it's like, all right, then he really started to look good the last couple weeks, and it's like, there's Jrue Holiday. Yeah, that's the guy. And him guarding LeBron was great. I thought on Christmas, he got in LeBron's head, which I didn't even think was possible at this point. But LeBron was afraid to turn and dribble against him, and he really, I thought, affected the game. I did not think he was good tonight, and this was a game that I thought he was going to be really important in. And part of it might have been just what they were doing with the lineups and putting Porzingis on Giddey. I'm sure if they had to do that over again, maybe you just put Jrue on Giddey and try to take Giddey out and make sure he doesn't have a good game. But, 7 points tonight, 2 for 8, 2 free throws, minus 15. They didn't play him in crunch time. It just kind of made me go, this is a guy who we're talking contract extension at the end of the year, and this was one of the 2 biggest games of the year, and he didn't play in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, and he had some real issues finishing earlier this season. He still had some of those, and we saw that one play tonight where he tried to go up and under against against Chet, and he just kind of threw it up in the air. So I think going back to Al and Porzingis when we talk about Jrue, I wonder if you got to start doing that with him a little bit. Not say every back-to-back he sits out, but maybe you got to start thinking about resting him, because think about his career recently. Go back to last year. He's overtaxed in the postseason trying to be the number 2 option. At times when Giannis goes down, he's trying to be the number 1 option. At the same time, he's covering Jimmy Butler on one end. Going all the way back to 2021, he's playing deep into the playoffs when he wins the finals. And then the following season, they have that grueling series against the Celtics. I just think there's a lot of mileage there. And the one thing I've noticed about Jrue
wait,
is...
hold on that point. He's
Yeah.
over 1,000 games combined, regular season and playoffs now. And 1,000, things have changed. And we're in the 2020s, guys, longevity, I get it. But the 1,000 mark is usually anything after 1,000. If you're still playing at a really high level, is a bonus, in my opinion. So, yeah, I'm monitoring it. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, and I think his biggest attribute now is not as like a guy that you just put on somebody to take out of the game. I think it's more about his defensive versatility. Like, we've seen him cover Giannis, and we've seen him cover Embiid. They put him on Anthony Davis at one point during the third quarter. We've seen him cover LeBron. But what I wonder about with Jrue is, we talked about before the season, like, hey, this may be the best guy to cover Dame. And like, you can go all the way back to the New Orleans series that he played against them. I don't know if that is his best thing anymore. And it's not a problem for the Celtics, because you have Derek White that can cover the elite guards. And I know that Jimmy Butler sort of gave it to him, and Jimmy was talking back and forth with him in that series against Milwaukee. But I actually think at this point in his career, he's better guarding up than he is actually covering like the traditional, like this team may not even make the playoffs, but like the Darius Garland types, the Damian Lillard types, the Tyrese Halliburton types, like those quick guards. I don't think those are his best matchups anymore. I think it's more of like the swing, the bigger 2s, the 3s and the 4s, and even to a lesser extent, centers. And it's good that you have Derek White to do that.
Guys.
Yeah, like I feel like we saw it a couple times tonight. And look, Shea does it to a lot of people, but like he had Jrue Holiday, they were neck and neck, and all of a sudden he's at the rim. And
yeah, Shea's not fair, because he's destroyed every single person in the league. I agree and I disagree with you, because on the one hand, you're right. We've seen over and over again now, he has been unable to really truly lock down scoring guards. On the flip side, I watch basketball every night. I don't see anybody doing it. And it goes back to like the stuff Steve Kerr was talking about a couple weeks ago about how hard it is to just play defense anymore. I don't really see any lockdown defensive point guard defense out there. I think White is the best defensive guard in the league right now. Him and Caruso are probably, there's a couple other guys, but White, if you're going to say like who brings the most to the table defensively, it's probably Derek White. And there's been guys who have been going by Derek White all season, because it's really hard to play defense and not foul. So I think where Jrue becomes really fun, especially if you're thinking a playoff series, is, when he's guarding Jimmy Butler, or when, I know he did do it well last year, but when you throw him on Giannis for a series, when you put him on Embiid, he becomes like a little Marcus Smartish. But going team by team, who they're going in the playoffs, like when they play Brunson, you're probably going to have to put Tatum and Brown on him as much as Derek White. Like, length bothers Brunson. When you play Dame, I'm not sure anybody's staying in front of Dame if he's playing well, And so to me, the bigger thing for me is his offense and how can you unlock that a little bit more? Because I like when he has the ball. The big thing just in general for this season is that they trust White. It's by the week they're trusting him more with the ball. Setting picks for him, having him in transition. That guy has so much confidence now with his 3-point shooting and getting to the rim. It's unbelievable. It's like, I remember you and I were talking after the Marcus Smart trade. The number one reason I think both of us liked the trade so much, it was like finally Derek White can be unleashed, because both of us believed in the stats. The stats were there. Like, when this guy has the ball in his hand, good things happen. And good things have been happening since they gave him the ball. And I wonder, like, I know he was 25-5 in December. Do you think that goes up? Does he become like a 22-6-6 guy, or is December the ceiling?
I think this is probably where he levels out, because I just don't think he's going to take many more shots, right? And I don't see fair. And I don't think the percentages stay like where they are right now. I think they can stay in a similar area, but to expect to like 50, 40, 90 is, I think, realistic that he actually like finishes somewhere around there. But I just don't think.
How about 2 blocks a game?
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, that streak he had where it's like Ron Harper, he tied Ron Harper for 4 games in a row with 3 consecutive blocks, and then he had like the most blocks ever for a guard in like a 6-game span
How
since
about the
Michael
one today?
Jordan.
Who was the one he had the block in the first half? Was that Shea?
It was literally on a lob attempt. He broke up a lob attempt as a guard, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of that, like the 2 plays that Porzingis made in the first half too, where first of all, like Jalen got lost, he came over and had a block on Micic, whatever that guy's name is, and then he had another one too where he challenged the shot at the rim, Micic passed it, and then he still got the block on a different offensive player, which was phenomenal. Right. To your point on White, by the way, he's in the 91st percentile as a pick and roll ball handler, 1.09 points per 100 possessions. Like, obviously, Dame has way higher volume, but he's like more efficient than Damian Lillard. Not to say that he could do it on the same usage, but my point being that's how efficient he's been. And I do feel like at times, like that is their best late game offense when they go. Now, I thought Tatum did a good job making decisions late in this game, but we saw, I forget which game it was on the road trip, if it was it the Lakers or the Kings? Whatever it was, like it definitely wasn't the Kings. I think it was the Lakers where they played through Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis late in the game. It was like high pick and roll for Derek White, and it feels like he always makes the right decision when it comes to that.
Well,
in terms
I was
of Jrue,
thinking
like,
of you today. Did you see that they actually posted up Tatum on a play in the last minute where they needed a basket? I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So they can go to NBA.com and cleaning the glass, and they're starting to realize that actually, this is one of the 8 best plays you can run in the NBA right now.
Well, and that's why I do think that they're doing a better job of just like, hey, when Tatum gets a switch, just give it to him. Because this is the one thing that aggravates me about Tatum. His post-up numbers are great. Actually, if you look at his isolation numbers, which have not been great in the past, they've been great this season. Better. The one thing, and he only took 5 threes tonight, which is like an accomplishment that he only took 5 threes. But he takes the 4th most pull-up threes per game in the NBA.
He took a terrible one with like 4 minutes left today.
Yeah, and if you look at all the
28-footer with like 22 seconds on the shot clock.
And I don't get it. I don't know why he takes those shots, because last year he's south of 30% on those pull-up threes. He's 44% on catch and shoot threes, and he can get to the free throw line for the month of December. He's at like 8 free throws per game. We know his finishing has been much better. He can post guys up. He can score in isolation. Why do you take a step back 3, especially when there's a center on you? That's the one that I don't understand the most. It's like,
here's the
you
counter.
Can pull that guy out and go buy him.
He's 26 years old. He's not totally the player he's going to be. And even this year, I feel like there's been some good strides. Like him guarding Shea today, to me, it's like that. It's like a win. And it's weird. They lose the game, but I felt pretty good about the loss. And then if I'm OKC, I just beat Minnesota and I beat Denver and I beat Boston. And I beat Boston in a game where Boston fought back and it actually seemed like I might choke away the game, and I executed offense at the end of games. So now I'm thinking I can play with any of these teams. This is not a fluke. Because we're past the 30 game mark now. Like this is the rabbit stage of the season is over. Like the Indiana going, 12-4 or whatever that shit's behind us. Now we're starting to find out who are your flaws? Like Minnesota is starting to feel you've seen a couple flaws now. It's like, oh, if Mike Conley sucks in a game, they have some issues. This OKC team's good. I think this Celtics team, when you think 7 losses and 6 of them, 2 plays go differently and they could have won all 6, like it's hard to be upset.
And the starting group, I believe they only have 2 losses together? Like this group that when they're actually all in the lineup, I believe this is only their 2nd loss altogether. But if you just look at it big picture wise, like I don't see anything really Milwaukee can do outside of like if Dame just goes crazy. But on the other end, like the Celtics are going to be able to take advantage of Lillard. Now, I don't think
it's bad for them. Yeah.
Yeah, their defense is really bad. Like there's this thing that was going around social media where Dame's like looking at where the screen's coming from and Halliburton just goes right by him. He's been, and like the numbers for the past couple years have told you that Lillard's just horrible defensively. Philly, that's a team where it's like, okay, they beat the shit out of the Bulls tonight. Maxi's playing outstanding. Of course, we know what they have in Embiid. Is there a move for them to make? Like,
well, there is a move. It's just, can they make it in time before, like they lost out on Anunoby.
Yeah, that's the one that would have scared me.
Of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that one would have scared me just because I feel like, okay, that's a guy that they can throw on Tatum. And the dirty secret about Philly is they've never had a guy to throw on Tatum. Like they were trying PJ Tucker. Remember they traded for what was his name? Was that McDaniel's brother that played for Philly last year?
No, but he was like his
the bad McDaniels.
He was like his second cousin.
Yeah, the guy that Tatum when he was playing for Charlotte put 50 on, and that's the guy
I'll tell you, if they keep Morris and they have the Batum Covington Morris, like that's at least better than what they had last year. And Morris does have the big brother, little brother thing with Tatum. Maybe it won't matter anymore, but I assume they're going to make a trade. And I assume Miami's going to make a trade. They have Lowry's expiring, and maybe they'll get into Mitchell if Mitchell becomes available. But Miami's going to do something.
The one thing that I feel better about with Miami this year compared to last year, and you're right, they probably will make a move, and maybe it's a big move. I mean, who knows? I mean, I wouldn't be trading for Zach LaVine, but if Zach LaVine got traded,
they're not going to do that.
Okay, so but I would say like if he got traded to any team, and I was worried about it, it'd only be Miami because they like somehow get the guy right. But the reason Miami doesn't,
you're right.
And I'm gonna hate to say this, I'll knock on wood. The reason they don't scare me as much as they have in the past is like I feel like Bam last year could just muck everything up because of the offensive personnel. Now, if he's not on Porzingis, then they have real trouble because then you can just give it to Porzingis and he can score on the post. So I think that Bam's going to have to cover Porzingis in a potential playoff series. And I feel like that's sort of going back to this whole theme of why they traded for him. I think that's the biggest difference going back to this season compared to last year. Like that's the one guy they can't lose. Like I think they could actually win a playoff series, not the finals, but they could win a playoff series without Tatum, or they could win a playoff series without Jalen. Now, not for the entire postseason run. I don't think they can win a championship that way. But if they don't have Porzingis for Philly, Milwaukee, or the Heat, I think they're in trouble.
Agree. We've said it before, he's the superpower of the team. He's the guy that raises the ceiling. You go from being a 10-story building to being a 20-story building, literally. I'll leave you with this. The next couple games, they're playing the Jazz at home on Friday. And then they have this weird, for some reason, they're playing in Indiana 2 more times, which I don't understand at all.
It's this baseball series stuff that they're doing in the NBA now.
But we already played in Indiana. So now this is somehow 3 Indiana games. Then home from Minnesota, at Milwaukee, and then home Houston. So that basically the next, that's all in like the next, they have a break and then Friday, and then it's like 5 games in 8 days, something like that. All of those teams bring something different to the table. Like Utah's just a weird team. They have these guards that attack the basket. Markkanen's tough. Kessler protects the rim, but they kind of ride whatever the hot hand is. Will Hardy. So, and that's a classic terrible Celtics letdown game where it's like, wait, we're losing by 18 at home to Utah. What's going on? Then you have the Pacers team, which has proven they're not afraid of the Celtics, and they'll go run and gun, and you try to play our pace. Timberwolves beat them already and had the McDaniels-Edwards combo. And then the Rockets is Ime coming back.
Yeah.
So, and with a team, Şengün, I think is going to be problematic for them. But I think, so that will be January 13th against all the playoff games. But after those 6 games, I think we'll have a really good feeling on what the ceiling of the Celtics team is. And I think that ceiling, I think they're the best team in the league. Them losing barely to OKC today doesn't change that in my head. I thought it was a better win for OKC, but we'll see 6 games from now.
All right. Well, 2 questions, actually, a comment and a question to the to what you laid out there.
Yeah.
Markkanen, that would scare me if he got traded to somebody in the East. Like
how about OKC?
OKC. That's a great one. I mean, he's one of the best catch and shoot 3-pointers in the shooters in the NBA. Like, what if Philly got in on that?
I just don't think he's available. I never believed that he was available to begin. Why would you trade him? They have 1 million picks already. What do they need to trade him for?
True, and I will say, and like Danny's got a lot out of the think about the Mitchell.
He doesn't care. Yeah, he'll trade anybody.
Yeah, and if they're a couple of years, obviously they're a couple of years away. Maybe they go out and do that. But the other interesting component of that is you see Will Hardy in the building, as you mentioned with Utah coming to town, and I know they're not having a great season. And then the Ime thing. So my question about the Rockets coming back, is your dad going to be okay, like with Ime in the building, like going up against second row Joe?
My dad loves Ime, as you know. He's still upset. He thought Ime was I think it was maybe in the running for his favorite Celtic coach. Joe's been growing on my dad a little bit this season. I think Charles Lee has been a big piece of that because I think Charles Lee's been really important. But just in general, he's He feels like he's seeing small strides in Joe. But we'll see. He could turn on Joe in 5 seconds, as you know. He still feels like the 3-point thing drives him nuts. Even them losing today, but only shooting 43s is a huge win for my dad. The jacking up just a million threes, he will never abide by that, because my dad, he's been in too many playoff games, and he's just like, here's what works in the playoffs. And we know that doesn't work in the playoffs. We have, 20 years of evidence now. So he wants them to attack the rim and play smart like they did tonight. So if they do that, he's happy. But he does miss Ime. He's going to be sad.
I do have faith now that when they get in a bind this year in the playoffs, they're actually going to do the right thing and give it to Porzingis, because I feel like we've seen it too many times. If
it's the matchup,
year. Yeah. So I do think that's a positive thing going.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
They probably don't do a thank you Ime video, I'm guessing.
I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be available.
It's going to be super awkward.
I mean, they had a Kelly Olynyk and a Kelly Olynyk video. Like,
I don't think we're getting the thank you Ime video. It's going to be super weird, though. There's no question. Anyway, all right. Well, I wish we were doing this after a win, but it was good to see you regardless.
No doubt about it.